and founder of progressive think tank NDN and a former advisor to the Bill Clinton campaign. Gentlemen, thanks to both of you for joining us. David, I can't help noticing number one on that list was the economy. And the thing that's going to make a difference in the economy is tax reform. I mean, they must really feel the pressure today. What do you think?
Any Republican who sits in a district with more than 2 traffic lights has to figure out how they get to yes on tax cuts. Because in 3 months, 95% of voters aren't going to remember who the governors of New Jersey and Virginia are, but they are going to know where their member of Congress was on whether taxes got cut or not.
So, Simon, I'm imagining that Democrats smell blood in the water. This tax deal is right there on the table. What is one thing that you think you could change about this bill that would make it more palatable to Democrats?
I don't think that's the issue, Melissa.
Wait, we're not going to do talking points.
No, we're not.
What's one thing?
It's not talking points. I actually understand what they're proposing, and I don't think the Democrats are going to support a bill that dramatically cuts taxes for very wealthy people, drives up the deficit. I'm going to finish. May I finish?
Well, you're doing talking points.
No, I'm not doing. It's insulting that you say that to me as if I don't actually understand what I'm saying and can do my own analysis about the economy.
But
Melissa,
you're not answering the question.
No, I am answering the question, which is Democrats are not going to support tax reform that dramatically cuts taxes on people that don't need tax cuts and prevents middle-class people from sharing in the benefits of these tax cuts while driving up the deficit. We're never going to support that framework. So if they want to move, as Senator Wyden said, to a bipartisan approach, right, we are very open to staying focused on the middle class and not driving up the deficit.
Okay.
That's what the Democrats want to do.
Melissa,
so David,
here's how you get...
Hang on. Okay, so after that speech, if we want to drill down on the actual details and try and make some progress, the nut of what he just said is the overall argument. So if you're trying to actually get something done, the first thing you might strip away, maybe it's that death tax, taking that off the table, putting it back, saying we're going to leave the death tax alone. Maybe that would get more Democrats, not Simon, who's not willing to come to the table at all, but real Democrats to the table.
Here's what gets Democrats to the table. Republicans getting to 51 votes. And then all of a sudden 6 or 7 Democrats are all of a sudden going to be for tax reform. Democrats are not going to help pass tax cuts unless Republicans get it across the line, and it's already going to vote for it. Democrats think that if they stop tax cuts, they can put Republicans in a bad spot going into the elections. Democrats aren't going to do one thing to pass tax cuts. If we're going to get tax cuts for the American people, it's going to be because the Republican majorities deliver it.
Simon, do you want to prove him right? Are you guys not going to do one thing to pass tax cuts? I mean, I asked you for one thing. Do you want to give me one thing?
No, I think, Melissa, you know, I've come on this show with you many times. You do the same thing over and over again.
No, I don't. I just want you to answer the question I asked.
No, I'm not answering the question. I'm answering the question.
I know you're not answering the question. That's the problem.
So the point is that Democrats are not going to agree to a tax cut plan that overwhelmingly benefits wealthy people.
You already said that.
Drives up the deficit.
You already said
that. But that's what's being proposed. So we're not going to support it. Repeating yourself
isn't helping the argument. I'm asking you, like we're asking everyone, to come to the table and try and offer something productive. Give me three things you want to strip away. Maybe it's the estate tax. Maybe it's SALT. I mean, tell me what you don't like about this. Can you be specific?
Melissa, I just told you, right, that we reject the frame that is being proposed here. We do not agree.
So you don't want to work at all. There's literally nothing in there that's decent.
We don't agree with the frame of the deal. What Senator Wyden said is what is the Democratic position, is that if the Republicans want to come to the table and work with us on tax cuts that actually really benefit middle-class people and don't drive up the deficit, we're game to do it, right? We've done it before. Our party's done it before.
So the tax cuts that are in there for the middle class, doubling the standard deduction, all the things that are in there, you don't like any of that would help working people, Simon?
You understand, right, based on the analysis, because I know you went to Harvard and studied economics, that in fact, over time, a majority of middle-class people will be paying more in taxes rather than less.
No,
and so we
I don't accept that math.
Well, but
because
that's
it's
actually
static
been
analysis,
proven.
and I don't accept static analysis. I only agree with dynamic analysis, because when you cut, the economy is going to grow. And I know you don't believe that.
I know.
Melissa,
Democrats... Instead of us fighting, let's let David finish. David, go ahead.
Yeah, sure.
Democrats could start by actually actually being for things they've been for in the past. Ron Wyden and Senator Crapo have actually put a framework not a lot different than what the current Republican bill in the Senate is talking about. So Democrats could actually be for things they've been for in the past, and they could then get on the board for tax cuts. But right now, this is to honor Roy Halladay. Republicans have the ball in their hand. We got to start throwing strikes. If we start throwing strikes, one, the economy is going to continue to improve for Americans, and two, we're going to be rewarded on Election Day in 2018.
All right, gentlemen, let's leave it there. You know, Simon, you and I are going to have to get a drink sometime. We can't show up and fight like this all the time.
Melissa, don't worry. I'm never coming back on the show ever again, so it doesn't matter. Thank you.
Berkeley. CNN's Don Lemon suggested that Antifa is a fever dream invented by us. Watch.
His obsession with Antifa, I don't understand. He has an unhealthy obsession with Antifa, and maybe it's because Fox News. I watch Fox News, and I've been watching Fox News for years, but lately they are obsessed with Antifa and with stories about race and pitting. Is the president being manipulated by Fox News on these stories?
Old Don Lemon. Love Don Lemon. He's not alone, by the way. Whoopi Goldberg of The View says Antifa isn't merely overblown, it's an outright fabrication. Watch.
Antifa is one of those things that, I don't want to say the right, but somebody came up with as a catchphrase so that you could say, you know, oh, there is violence on the other side. But I don't remember violent demonstrations before the gentleman who's in now got in. But oftentimes I've found that sometimes the side that is scratching the loudest has sort of orchestrated this so they can bitch about it.
Who watches that show? Well, to help us sort out what is real and what is fake, what's a Potemkin protest group, we're joined by townhall.com senior columnist Kurt Schlichter. Kurt, is it possible, and I've actually heard people suggest this, some elected officials, that Antifa, beneath the masks, they're all townhall.com readers?
Well, yeah, I mean, I like to mask up and go beat people in the head with a bike lock. No, really, it's all an illusion, Tucker. You're pulling the strings on the president. You're convincing him that there's not really crowds of little junior anarchists and angry suburban rich kids acting out their fantasies on our streets. No, it's all an illusion. And look, I've had run-ins with Don Lemon in the past, and after listening to what he said, you know, you always have to wonder, has Don been drinking again? And after hearing him say that, I'm kind of hoping he has, because that's the only possible explanation for that string of words that was so transcendently stupid that my head's still spinning. I don't know if I can drive home.
So I can't help myself. I like Don Lemon. I still like Don Lemon, but I don't think he's responsible for what he said. But there's a conservative radio show host who took a ton of heat for suggesting that one tragedy was, you know, made up, that there were actors involved in it. I hear mainstream media figures basically making the same argument right here, that this is some conspiracy, that these left-wing agitators, violent ones, are actually right-wingers. It seems every bit as insane to me.
Well, I think it's right up there with fire can't melt steel as the kind of idiotic insight that makes me want to completely redo our education system from K all the way to graduate school. I mean, how dumb do they think we are, Tucker? I know how dumb they probably think the people who follow them are, and they're right. But how dumb do they think us normal people are?
Oh,
do they think we really don't believe that these guys are doing this?
And you're absolutely right about our education system. What do we think is going to happen when you turn it over to lunatics? Kurt, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
It is plagued by the specter of fascist violence, and in an ironic twist, these fascists call themselves anti-fascist, Antifa. Whenever conservatives want to speak on campus or hold a rally, Antifa groups are a reliable presence, and they routinely try to stamp out speech using vigilante violence, which they perversely justify as a form of self-defense. Mike Isaacson is a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. He founded the Antifa group Smash Racism DC, and he joins us tonight. Professor, thanks for coming on.
Hi, how you doing? Thank you for having me.
So your position, tell me if I'm mischaracterizing this, is people you define as fascists do not have free speech rights.
No. My position is that communities have the right to defend themselves against groups that actively seek to eliminate members of that community.
Defend themselves against violence, or defend themselves
against violence? I mean, we were talking about...
No, but physical violence? So if I say, for example...
We're talking about a history, a group that has a history of enacting hate crimes. Yeah, no, we're not... Are we going to pretend like we're suddenly in this ahistorical world where Dylan Roof or Wade Michael Page doesn't exist, where Anders Breivik doesn't exist? Are you kidding me?
No. Are you really a professor, by the way?
What?
So here's the question, though. Is it past statements that have espoused violence, or is it acts of violence?
It's
so
both.
Could you? Okay,
I mean, we're talking about.
Hold on. Let me just finish my question. Could you commit violence against me if you thought that I had a history of saying things that you imagined were violent?
I would never commit violence against you. I actually, when I was younger, I was a libertarian, and I actually looked up to you when you were a libertarian.
Okay, but let's take me out of this. Okay. Let's just, I want to know, like, the concept of self-defense is a legal concept, but it's also got, like, a long history and tradition in common law. So the idea is, if I'm hitting you, if I strike you physically, if I physically commit violence against you, you have a right to commit violence back in order to protect yourself or your property. Sure. But you're seeming to say that anybody who has espoused ideas that have at some point in history led to violence can be the subject of violence from you. You're not saying that?
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that I believe it is the right for communities to get together to assess what is a threat to them and to defend themselves against that threat.
So give me an example. Like, what public figure in America right now could be shut down, could have his free speech rights taken away, and could be the subject of violence under the standards you're describing?
Well, I mean, for instance, I think that the framework here of talking about violence as opposed to talking about preserving the very freedoms that you and I both enjoy is a false one. I mean, ultimately, we're talking about a movement that actively advocates against all the fetters of democracy. I mean, we're talking about Richard Spencer, who publishes on altright.com, publishes an article on July 28th by a man named Vincent Law, where the headline was, "To protect free speech, get rid of democracy." So we really have to...
You know what? Okay, so let's use that example. I disagree with that. I haven't seen the piece, but it doesn't sound like something I'd agree with.
It's not.
Does Richard Spencer have a right to speak in public?
Richard Spencer is a danger to society. When he speaks in public, what he is doing, he is publicly recruiting people to his very violent movement, very violent ideology.
So does he have a right to speak in public?
I don't think he has a right to speak in public unopposed, and that is ultimately what the purpose of Antifa is to show up and oppose him.
But it's not opposition. You shut people down, you prevent them from speaking, and you commit violence against them. I know a number of people, well, don't tell me it's untrue, I know people who have been knocked down and beaten by people from Antifa. So that is true. It does happen. We have it on tape. We just roll the tape.
Right.
So you're saying, is that justified?
Yes. I believe that communities have the right to defend themselves against threats to their community.
Against ideas they don't like.
No,
they have a right to commit
against
violence.
People who have explicitly said that they want to eliminate those people from our society.
But you're conflating violence with ideas.
No,
if I have not raised my hand to strike you, you have no right to strike me.
But in order to raise your hand to strike me, you have to think that you're going to strike me. And when you are going out in public as a protester, explicitly saying that you want to eliminate most of the people from this country, I believe most of the people in this country have the right to say, no, that's not okay.
Okay, but you absolutely have a right to say it's not okay. What you don't have a right is to prevent me from saying what I think, even if you disagree, and you definitely don't have a right to commit violence against me. And you're blurring the lines there. And by the way, don't you work at a criminal...
Yes, I'm in an economics department, yes.
It's hilarious. Okay, you don't have the right to do that. You have the right to make a counter case. Do you see the distinction that I'm making?
Tucker, when I walked into this building, I counted 5 security guards at the front door and 2 police cars outside. Are you going to tell me that the violence that they would enact against someone who is looking to do you or any number of the people that work here harm, are you going to tell me that the violence that they enact to protect preemptively the staff that are protected also by the barricades that you have?
I don't even know what you're saying. I'm honestly not following you.
Are you going to pretend that you don't have security?
well, I actually don't have security, but there is security at
there's
our
security
building,
in your building, for sure.
And there's security at lots of buildings.
And the reason that there is security in your building the reason that you have security is because ultimately that security provides a space for nonviolent civil discourse, which is ultimately what we want.
But you don't own. Slow down. There are lots of million distinctions here, but you don't own the public square. You don't own the street.
But I believe the public owns the public square, and at the end of the day,
you're not in charge of the public, and you're not in charge of deciding.
The public isn't even in charge of the public. Okay, we are talking about a system that has been gerrymandering people out of public representation. Okay, if we're relying on the cops, ultimately those cops are working for the very people that you work for, and not in the interest of the vast majority of society. We don't have representation. We don't have representation by the state. We don't.
Okay,
this is something you have to
last question. Do you teach students?
I do.
Huh. And do you teach them that the First Amendment does not apply to people they disagree with?
I teach them to think critically, and that's why I'm very open about my anti-fascism and my anarchism.
So if someone in your class said, you know what, I'm a Trump voter, I'm against affirmative action.
I've had those, and I encourage them to research and explore and hold them to the exact same standards that I hold any other student.
Yeah, I bet.
I do.
Yeah,
I had an alt-right supporter actually in my class last semester. Yeah. I worked with him on his papers. He started off kind of bad at citation. I got him better at citation, and he wrote a paper that was an A paper. I mean, I am not discriminating against my students.
Yeah.
Ultimately,